Welcome to Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, where we talk about math, science, history, and trains, and do it all with some very fun activities. Hi, I'm Bob Lettenberger, Mr. Bob, Education Director for the National Railroad Museum. If you're watching us live on Facebook this afternoon, well, tell you what, if you'd like to type in a question, we'll answer those after our segment today. Or if you'd just like to let us know who you are and where you're watching from, we'd love to say hello. Also, make sure you like the National Railroad Museum's Facebook page. Today, we're going to take a look at the history, the legend, and the lore of a young lady in railroading, Kate Shelley. Our story today begins on July 6, 1881. The day in Magoyna, Iowa dawned as one of those hot, humid summer days where you knew before the day was over there was going to be a thunderstorm and it was going to be severe. As the day rolled on, the clouds began to roll in down the Des Moines River Valley, and by supper time, the rain had begun to fall. Kate Shelley and her mom tried to get the four younger Shelley children to eat dinner, but to no avail. The storm was too fierce outside. As night came, the rain increased and the wind kicked up. And with the wind, the rain was driven in sheets against the sides of the little Shelley farmhouse. It sounded as if someone was throwing sand or gravel at the little structure. About 11 o'clock, Kate and her mom heard a noise above the din of the storm. It wasn't lightning, it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of a locomotive, a train engine, making its way down the tracks of the Chicago Northwestern Railway, which ran right next to the Shelley farm. Shortly after this, Kate and her mom heard another sound. It was a crash, and again it was loud enough to be heard over the storm. Kate immediately grabbed her rain slicker and her little lantern and dashed out into the storm, her mother calling after her, begging for her to come back inside where it was safe, but Kate ran across the water-filled farmyard until she got to the tracks of the Chicago Northwestern. She turned and she headed east in the direction of Honey Creek, this place where that sound had come from. And as she came around the bend, she found out what had made that horrific crashing sound. You see, Honey Creek, normally a quiet, calm little stream, had enraged to a torrent of brown, bubbling water gushing down its little valley. And with it, it had washed out one of the supports on the Honey Creek Bridge. And when that little locomotive got onto the bridge, it collapsed, taking the bridge, the locomotive, and the entire crew into the wild torrent that was now Honey Creek. Kate knew what she had to do. She turned and headed west down the tracks toward the depot in Magoyna, Iowa. For you see, within the hour, the Midnight Express was due. And if Kate didn't alert the people at the depot that the bridge was out over Honey Creek, several hundred more might meet a horrific fate that evening. Kate ran, stumbled, crawled, moved as quickly as she could through the storm until she reached the bridge over the Des Moines River. The bridge was a huge structure, and it had one narrow little wooden walkway down the middle between the rails. Kate found the walkway and began to stumble her way across the bridge, only her lantern and the lightning dancing through the skies to guide her. She got to the middle of the bridge and she stopped, frozen in her tracks. She realized that the water was high enough under the bridge that it was actually lapping at the bottom of the structure. And then she heard a horrific noise. It was as if 1,000 horses were running through the woods, causing all the leaves to flutter in their wake. A gust of wind kicked up and knocked Kate to her knees, smashing her little lantern. And then in the lightning, as Kate regained her feet, she looked up the river and saw what was making that noise. It was a huge oak tree that had been uprooted by the river and was being carried along on the current, and it was heading right toward the bridge, right where Kate was standing. If she didn't move, she and the bridge would clearly be taken downstream. But then, just at the last second, Kate heard another noise. It was as if the water was draining out of a sink, and then that oak tree was sucked under the bridge and shot out the other side, and Kate was saved. But she was still standing in the middle of the Des Moines River Bridge in a fierce thunderstorm. The Midnight Express was on its way, and she needed to get to the depot at Magoina, Iowa. And she continued on her journey west, stumbling, crawling. Every time she fell, splinters from that little walkway would cut into her legs and tear her little dress. Then, suddenly, she realized that there was solid ground under her feet again. She had made it across the river valley. She only had about a quarter mile to go to the depot, and she was about exhausted. But she staggered and crawled that last quarter mile, opened the door to the waiting room, and collapsed on the floor there in the depot. People gathered around as she gasped to stop the Midnight Express because the bridge over Honey Creek had collapsed. Kate Shelley was definitely a heroine that evening, saving the lives of potentially many people. But as this story has been told and retold over the last nearly 140 years, just like with any good legend or lore, there's some twists and turns that have made it in that aren't quite accurate. And of course, that's the fun of any good story. We as the reader have to discern what is actually fact and what is fiction in some cases. So let's take a look at the story of Kate Shelley. First, Kate actually wasn't 15 the night of that horrific storm. She actually was 17 years old, although it is properly reported that she was only 15. If you look at the map here of Magoina, Iowa and the surrounding area, you can see Kate Shelley's farm and the bridge over Honey Creek and Des Moines River Bridge, and of course the depot, and it clearly was about a 2.5 mile trek for Kate that evening, but in some ways it was all for naught. The Chicago Northwestern Railway, perceiving how severe the storm was, had already stopped the Midnight Express several stations to the west, and so Kate's alarm that the bridge over Honey Creek really didn't help the Midnight Express. It was already safe, but it did alert the folks at the depot there in Magoina that they were going to need to send out a party to look for that engine crew. We see the Kate Shelley farmhouse, or do we? This is one of many pictures that has been published purporting to be Kate Shelley's farmhouse. Here's another view that is in popular circulation. So, in many ways, we really don't know what the Shelley farmhouse actually looked like from our story. The depot in Magoina, Iowa, long since torn down, but this was Kate's destination on that fateful evening. And here there's another little twist to the story. The Shelley family had immigrated to the United States from Tipperary County in Ireland several years before. To supplement their income on the farm, Kate's father, Michael, had taken a job with the Chicago Northwestern doing track work and bridge maintenance. He was a section foreman in the area around Magoina. In 1878, sadly, he died. But the story goes, by some, that he died of tuberculosis. Some say it was an accident on the railroad, and some sources don't list any cause for Mr. Shelley's passing. Another interesting twist to the story that we're not quite sure of. Kate, of course, became a great hero to the Chicago Northwestern, and a number of years later, in fact in 1898, they began building a new bridge over the Des Moines River Valley. The bridge was well over 100 feet tall, measured 2,600 feet long, and to honor Kate, they named the bridge for her. Kate, by this time, was actually working for the Chicago Northwestern Railway. She was the depot agent at the Magoina Depot. Now, this Kate Shelley Bridge stood in service for over 100 years until 2009, when the Union Pacific Railroad, which bought up the Chicago Northwestern, erected a new structure directly adjacent to the old one. The new bridge is a little bit higher and actually spans 2,800 plus feet, making it one of the longest railroad bridges in our country. The new bridge can handle 2 trains simultaneously traveling at 70 miles an hour, and the Union Pacific, carrying on tradition, named this bridge as well the Kate Shelley Bridge. Kate Shelley passed in 1912, January 21st. She worked for the Chicago Northwestern until shortly before her passing, and she is regarded as one of the heroines of Iowa folklore and of women in railroading. And now you know the story of a very brave young lady, Kate Shelley. If you'd like to read a little bit more about Kate Shelley, I recommend that you pick up the book, A Treasury of Railroad Folklore. It's edited by B.A. Botkin and Alvin Harlow. You should be able to find this at just about any library. You know, at the National Railroad Museum, our mission is to inspire lifelong learning by providing dynamic educational opportunities through the preservation of railroad objects, engaging exhibits, and innovative programs. Our museum, as a nonprofit organization, is supported by both public and private donations and by our museum members. And if you would like more information on how you can support the National Railroad Museum or become a museum member, visit our website, nationalrrmuseum.org. Hey, I'm Mr. Bob. Thanks for stopping by Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, and we'll see you again real soon.